Well, when you've been around as many decades as I have, there's a lot of these Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday stories that I could, but I thought, well, it could be the youngest, probably one of the youngest ones that I remember is when my parents lost me in the store. I go in a big department store, and I remember it. I was probably only like 4 or 5. And I always remember they said, if you ever get lost, go to the front of the store and look for the policeman, because back then there was, it was obvious policemen or security. And so I did, and I was so brave until my parents walked up and then I started crying. I said, "You lost me." And I remember that. And then I thought, well, there's a time, it was about 79, 80. I worked at a company here in York that will remain nameless, but I worked in the photography department. And there was in corporate communications, it was called, and all that. It was back when we made slides, if you remember what they are. And these 2 guys that worked in the dark room, I mean, they were just crotchety old men. To me, they were older than me. And until one day, one stood by the door and the other one pulled me into the dark room and had my shirt almost off before I could get away from them. And that was back before women had anywhere to go with all that stuff. So that's when I learned about boundaries. You don't go near this far. You don't allow anybody to be by yourself. And then I thought, well, this week I have to add this in, because last week, my brother was supposed to call me, and he didn't, but his partner, his girlfriend, sent me a text and said, "Call me." Well, she has never done that in the 12, 13 years they've been together unless there's something going on. And so I called her, and she said, "Well, the feral cats up behind the shop bit and scratched everybody, and we all have to have rabies shots." And so what my brother had to go through and she says, "And don't tell Paul that I called you and told you about this, because I asked him to call you." So my cortisol level went way up, and my sugar level was way out of whack because I was more worried about him, because what you have to do to send a cat part to the rabies lab, and my brother is a pet lover, it was like awful. And I knew he would be more upset about that than getting all these rabies shots. So then I was thinking about probably one of the most harrowing things was for a while, I lived in this little place in North York, and it was a shack. I don't know anywhere else. It's not a cottage. I mean, they call it a cottage, but it was a shack. And when I moved there, I just felt something wasn't right. And it started getting more and more oppressive. And at nighttime, it was getting really oppressive until it got to the point, and I'd only been there, a few weeks, maybe a month, until one night it got so bad. I was laying in bed, and there was I don't talk about this stuff much, but there was an oppression on me. I could not move, like something was holding my body down. And all I could do in all my years of training is I just laid there and sang "Jesus Loves Me" over and over and over and over until finally it left. And just that feeling of that evil oppression was probably one of the most, I was scared. Yeah, I admit it. I mean, it was scary. And once it left, there's been times since then, and even now, and all the things that have been going on, where I have been around that kind of oppression. But I think for me, I've always been thankful to have the hope and a foundation of knowing that that's not who is in control, and that I will always be safe until I'm not. And then we go to heaven, and it don't matter.